Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Controversy continues to swirl around the NFL about how the league is dealing with players accused of domestic abuse. There are allegations that officials knew long ago of a videotape showing Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice knocking his future wife unconscious. But it wasn't until the video went public that the NFL decided to suspend Rice indefinitely. Meanwhile, there have been at least 6 other recent cases involving NFL players and domestic abuse. Of course, domestic violence is not just an NFL problem. It's a serious problem throughout the United States. Here in Michigan, 1 in 3 families are impacted by domestic violence, and 40% of women ages 16 and over have been sexually assaulted. So joining us today to talk about domestic violence in and outside the world of sports are Beth Morrison, who is president and CEO of Haven, Drew Sharp, who's my colleague at the Detroit Free Press, a columnist there, and Dr. Lynn Lewis, a therapist and relationship expert. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
I wish I was having you here to talk about something more cheerful, but this is what's in the news right now, and it's a really serious problem, and I'm frankly confused about what role I think the NFL should be playing in this. I mean, they're taking a lot of heat for the way it's been done. What would have been the right way to deal with this, before and after?
Well, I think before, the NFL has a huge fan base. They have a lot of influence in our society and our culture in the U.S. They employ thousands of people around the country, and you look at all the different employees at the different arenas and fields and teams, and the impact that they have really on American life is rather large. So prior to this even becoming, a spotlight for the NFL, they really haven't done anything around domestic violence.
Right.
They haven't made one of their causes. They devote almost all of October to breast cancer awareness, which is wonderful. Yeah. It's a great cause and something that needs a lot of attention. But here's something that impacts more women, more families than breast cancer is really ignored by the NFL and has been for decades.
Right.
Yeah, the league's problem right now is that they cannot create a logical explanation why initially, before we saw the second video in the elevator, why did they think that 2 games was a sufficient punishment for domestic abuse?
Right.
They can't give an answer. They're saying that, well, we're wrong, we messed up, we're trying to correct this, but initially you thought you did the right thing.
Right.
And that speaks to the underlying issue here, and it's not just the NFL, it's cultural, it's a national thing. Men in charge of these things, they don't really understand the severity of domestic abuse. And until that happens, whether it's the NFL or not.
You feel like the men in charge of the league.
If you have more women in charge of this, put Connie Rice as commissioner, I think you might have a different approach right now. But I think it starts with that when you have the men in charge who don't really understand the gravity of this, and they do not, when players, in this case, the players in a professional football league, they cross that line, they don't think of it as seriously as they should.
Yeah.
Well, since we don't have women in charge, then it is incumbent upon the men to listen to the women.
Right.
And to involve the women and engage the women. And I think this is an opportunity for the NFL to take a leadership role in addressing domestic violence, not just those who are abused, because that is critical, but also the abusers, because the abusers continuously abuse.
Right.
And if we don't stop that cycle of abuse, then we'll forever have abusers. So I think what the NFL needs to do, pull in women and say, tell us your story. Tell us what we can't see as men.
Right.
And listen to them and use this as a teachable and leadership moment.
Yeah. Speaking of the cycle of abuse, that's something you are really familiar with in your organization. This is what you see, right? That it happens over and over and perpetuates itself.
Well, absolutely, and I think also another point, just to piggyback off what was just said too, is that Ray Rice was not the first NFL player who has been
by far
caught, held accountable or not held accountable by the legal community, but been charged, arrested. So the NFL has ignored this problem for decades.
Yeah.
It didn't just come on their agenda now. It's something that they've swept under the rug with no accountability or very little accountability in the past. But back to, the cycle, we know that Children are greatly impacted by domestic violence. We know that those children who are raised in homes where they witness domestic violence have a high likelihood of becoming abusive or abuse themselves.
Come to think it's normal.
Not to say that it certainly is not the case for all.
Right.
But without any kind of intervention, without any kind of appropriate role models, without any communication within society about what's right and what's wrong in a relationship, it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah.
And that should be the story now, Stephen. That should be the story about how we can help break this cycle. But because of the way our media culture is now, we're all about trying to take down the powerful as quick as possible. So this has become a Watergate-like thing with Roger Goodell. What did he know and when did he know it?
Right.
He is not obstructing justice. Whether he didn't see it or not, no laws were broken, but everyone is just jumping on the commissioner in the NFL because he has lorded himself over the players and saying, I can be judge, jury, and executioner whenever I choose to, and now he finds himself.
So should Roger Goodell lose his job? I mean, I have said a couple times, seems to me, he probably should lose his job, right?
He should lose it. He could lose his job. He's not going to resign that way because the owners are happy. The fact that he's making money for this league.
Right.
And what the NFL is trying to do now is change the narrative and admit that it made some mistakes and is trying to do a better job of understanding the situation. But until the public, though, takes the focus off of punishing the commissioner and point it on the actual issue.
Right.
You can fire Roger Goodell today. Is that going to change the understanding of domestic violence? No.
Right.
Then you've accomplished nothing then.
Right.
That's right.
And it's a societal issue way bigger
Right.
than the NFL.
Yeah, we live in a violent society, and many persons who are in the NFL and outside of the NFL live in a violent neighborhood, in violent cities, and the people they see oftentimes are exhibiting violent behavior toward others. So we, as Beth said, we need intervention. We just don't need to say, hey, we have this problem. We have to say, look, we have to help those who are abusing, and we have to help those who are being abused.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Men who do this, who engage in this behavior, what is the remedy for that? I mean, I think some people think it's almost too late to intervene after they're doing it. That there is no real redemption from that kind of behavior. Is that true?
I don't believe that. I think that it really starts with the accountability, though.
Mm-hmm. That you don't get away with it.
You don't get away with it. That we are not going to tolerate this behavior. If they're not held accountable, and if people continue to look the other way, if no one addresses it, if no one calls them on the behavior, then they will continue the behavior. And unfortunately, that's what happens now, that unless you are held accountable. But the accountability, you know, and in this case, it's all the focus has been on Goodell, but what about the court system?
Right.
You know, this case started with a court system.
Right.
And did the court truly hold this man accountable for the behavior that he exhibited? I believe that they did not.
Yeah.
Our
And
country
we see
has
that
some,
a lot,
we have
right?
really good domestic violence laws on the books
Yeah.
across the country. Certainly we do here in Michigan. Not to say that there isn't room for improvement, but unfortunately the laws are not fully enacted.
You have prosecutors who undercharge
We have
or
undercharged. We have judge or juries who dismiss or let the behavior go. You know, are somebody even arrested? Are they taken seriously? Are the charges elevated to where they should be elevated? I mean, you face more sanctions for abusing a pet on the first time than you do the first time that you're abusive towards a partner.
Yeah. Drew, you said something interesting about the culture being part of the problem in the league. What is that culture like? I mean, I think most people, you know, we watch football, we root for the players. I don't know that I know what the culture inside that league is
The culture is that these athletes are treated as gladiators of the modern day, that they are trained to be have a controlled aggression. It's a violent sport.
Right, sure.
And I'm afraid that the NFL has systematically just kind of condoned that if these guys, we train these guys to be violent.
Right.
And if they can't flip that switch off and they get back home, well, you know, that's just one of the consequences.
Sure.
That has to change. You know, that has to there has to be some type of better understanding that these guys, we put them up on these pedestals, but they are people like everyone else, and they need to have a better understanding, a better grasp of personal responsibility. These are athletes who really didn't have much of a father figure going, getting into college. Sure. They come to the NFL needing to be taught discipline, things that most of us get taught when we're teenagers. That's part of the problem as well. And that's where the NFL can take a step forward and try to do a better job of educating their players and get them to understand that you have to have respect for yourself, first and foremost, if you're going to have respect for other people. And a lot of these athletes don't.
And they don't get that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, this is a problem we see manifest itself with men, but it starts with boys, right?
It starts with boys because oftentimes parents don't even realize how they are teaching their sons to be aggressive. Don't cry, take it like a man. I've recently interviewed a man who was talking about how his father would whip him. And he said he would give me a kunte kinte whipping and say, take it like a man. So by that, a manhood and masculinity then were associated with abuse and
some sort of violence.
Exactly. Right. And that's part of the cycle that has to be broken. It's learned behavior, it's generational, and it's time for us to really address it so that we won't have others being victimized by this continuation of violence.
Right, right. What about the women? A lot was made of the fact that Ray Rice's now wife came out and said, listen, this happened, it was unfortunate. He's still my husband, I love him, I'm gonna stay with him. There was a lot made of the sort of culture of victims, and people not necessarily feeling free to respond the way they should. What should we be teaching young women, though, about the situation?
Well, I think unfortunately, most often than not, the conversation becomes what about her behavior versus keeping the spotlight on his behavior, because his behavior, obviously,
he is the problem.
Led to, I mean, he's the problem. She's not the problem, and unfortunately, we go that way too often. But I think what we teach young girls is what we teach young boys. Yeah. We talk about healthy relationships. We talk about gender differences. We talk about respect. We talk about how to solve problems. We talk about how to handle our emotions. And we need to focus on that piece of it, and we need to spend more time having those conversations with boys. Yeah. A lot of us want to, we need to talk to our daughters. We need to talk to our daughters. Right. Don't take it the first time. Get out. Why? We need to have that conversation with our boys so that there is no first time. Right. Don't do it the first time, and that's where we need to spend a lot of our time and energy. Right.
I could have you guys here for another hour, I'm sure, and get to really great stuff, but we're out of time. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.